What's up guys, and welcome back to another episode of the 2019 F1 modded career mode. Here today for round number 7 at the Canadian Grand Prix. And yeah, we're at the 1/3 point in this season as we approach the new year. So as we actually get into 2019, we'll finish off the last 2/3 of this season. If you are enjoying this series so far, do make sure to leave a like down below. It's been a pretty good one so far, despite the terrible result in Monaco last time out. But today, on screen, as you can see, we have got a couple of upgrades which can hopefully power us to a decent result here in Montreal. So we've got an engine upgrade, which is obviously really good for this Canada track where we have a lot of straights. And we also have a weight reduction upgrade in the chassis department. So upgrades in a couple of areas, and we've also got a future upgrade, and it is a major upgrade in the powertrain department. So that'll be good. We should be pretty much on a par with the Ferrari engines come the British Grand Prix, as you can see, which is when that one will be with us. And we've also got a durability upgrade that will be with us for the French Grand Prix next time out. In terms of the performance chart, we're on a very much an upward trend. Unfortunately, Red Bull have also had a decent number of upgrades recently, meaning that we are still the 4th quickest team, but we should be a lot quicker than Haas and Racing Point, who have actually fallen behind McLaren now. Now, I'm feeling relatively confident for this Canadian Grand Prix, a track which is probably in my top 3 favourite on the calendar, so fingers crossed we can get ourselves to a good result. And as we take a look at what happened in qualifying, as usual, it's a front row of Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel, something which has happened in 6 out of the 7 races so far this season. Behind those two on the front row, we've got Charles Leclerc and Pierre Gasly, with Max Verstappen and Valtteri Bottas in behind them. Then we've got Kevin Magnussen and Carlos Sainz, who both out-qualified myself in the Renault car, and our teammate Daniel Ricciardo is in 11th. So despite clearly having the 4th quickest car on the grid, that lack of engine power is really hurting us still. And as we go further down the grid, the Williams cars seem to be doing pretty well this weekend. And Sergio Perez in the Racing Point car, and Daniel Kvyat in the Toro Rosso, as well as Lance Stroll in the other Racing Point car, have all taken grid penalties. So going out on to the formation lap then, we'll take a quick look in the bottom right at what the drivers' standings are looking like. So it's Sebastian Vettel ahead of Lewis Hamilton, pretty much been the trend all season at the top. And ourselves, we actually slipped down to P10 last time out after not scoring any points in Monaco, a race which we should have probably done quite well in. But nonetheless, we're hoping for a good result today, starting inside the top 10, and hopefully we can capitalise on the fact that this is one of our favourite tracks. Yeah, that's got to be the aim. Get that 7th place, be the best of the rest. And as we go to the 5 red lights now for the start of the Canadian Grand Prix, it is lights out and away we go here in Montreal. And it's not a great start from ourselves. It's a good one from Carlos Sainz, who's trying to make the move on Magnussen. And then we try and dive it down the inside of the both of them as the McLaren and Haas car duel through the first couple of corners. And we've already been challenged by Romain Grosjean, who is thinking about putting one down the inside of us at the first chicane. And Kevin Magnussen gets past Carlos Sainz, and it looks as if they're now settling into formation, and we're trying to go down the inside of Carlos Sainz, but it's not quite working here on lap 1 of the Grand Prix. Of course, we've got 35 laps, one of the longer races in terms of distance, in terms of laps. We've got 35, 39 I believe is the highest at the Monaco Grand Prix. So it's quite a short circuit, of course, here in Montreal, but we've got plenty of DRS zones later on in the race to make some overtakes. Now, currently, we're actually under pressure by Romain Grosjean there on the run-up to the hairpin. But now, as we unleash ourselves onto this, I'd say this is the main straight on the circuit. Probably the main overtaking zone as we go into the final chicane. We've got it in the overtake ERS mode. And we're going to take a look down the inside of Carlos Sainz. But no, we're not going to be too aggressive on lap 1. Although Sainz was really out of shape there on the run out to the Wall of Champions. He was lucky not to get more out of shape, but he still holds P8 over ourselves. We go diving down the inside. Sainz has lost a lot of time to Kevin Magnussen, who is up there in P7. So we'll try not to waste too much time behind him. But we'll take a quick replay of the start from the perspective of the front runners. And it was a very, very good getaway from the pole sitter Lewis Hamilton, with Vettel really bogging down his teammate Charles Leclerc, trying to challenge him in at the first couple of corners. But it looks as if Vettel just about managed to hold on to P2. Yes, indeed he did. Although, as you can see, Leclerc getting really, really racy there ahead of the Red Bull of Pierre Gasly, I believe, who is sitting in P4. We'll take a look at in a minute. Yes, indeed, it is Pierre Gasly. Of course, everyone at the top of the order on the Hypersoft tyres, the softest compound that is available. And it's looking like a two-stop strategy today for everyone, with Max Verstappen falling a position behind Valtteri Bottas in to P6. And yeah, those top 6 cars, I expect to see them go off into the distance. But so long as we're closing in on Sainz and Magnussen, I won't be too concerned. So we now skip on to lap 4. Of course, DRS will now be active. But we are 1.2 seconds behind Carlos Sainz. Now, the good news is we're quite a bit ahead of Romain Grosjean behind us. So at this stage of the race, we're in a little bit of no man's land. And I think the goal before the first round of pit stops, which should be coming around lap 7 or 8, is just to try and close up to Carlos Sainz. This is really where we're sort of losing the time, at the start of Sector 2. But now skipping all the way onto lap 8, there's still no overtaking action in our race. But coming into the pits now, you can see in the bottom right corner is Pierre Gasly. So it's a pretty early stop from him. And the fact that he's come in on lap 8, as I mentioned earlier, means that he's possibly committing to a different strategy. So while I'm looking to go Hypersoft and 2 sets of the Ultrasoft tyres, Gasly has gone onto another set of the Hypersoft. So maybe it's a 3-stop strategy for the Red Bull driver, who has emerged behind our teammate in P11 by the looks of it. But the skies are looking very, very overcast overhead. I don't believe there's any threat of rain this afternoon. But as we now go on to lap 9, just 1 lap later in the Grand Prix, our tyres are not looking in a good shape whatsoever, as cars are now crowding in it to the pit lane as we make our first of what should hopefully be 2 stops this afternoon. And as I mentioned before, we'll go onto the Ultrasoft tyres. Now we've still got, 26 laps left in this Grand Prix, so it should be 13 laps apiece on the Ultrasoft tyres, coming in on about lap 22 for our final stop of the afternoon. It's a 2.7 second pit stop. Pretty standard stuff. You don't really get big variation in pit stop times on this game. But the big question is, where are we going to emerge in this race? It is in P11. We've got a nice little gap in front of us. Fortunately, we managed to get ahead of Lance Stroll, who I don't believe has pitted as of yet. Of course, he started all the way down in P20. So I'd like to think that we would come out ahead of him. But we've got Kevin Magnussen up ahead in P10. I would say that we've closed up to him, but it doesn't really look as if we have. The big one that we're looking for is Carlos Sainz, who, as you can see on the mini-map, is just emerging from the pit lane. So where is the McLaren man going to come out? He is still ahead of us in this Grand Prix. And it's difficult to say whether we've really closed up to him. He was about 1.5 seconds ahead when we came in for our pit stop. And it looks as if it's still pretty much the same. But he is also on the Hypersoft tyres, so maybe it's going to be a 3-stop strategy for him as well. Or he could possibly go for a long stint on the super soft tyres at the end of the Grand Prix for the final 15 laps or so. Because, of course, he has done 10 laps on that first stint on the Hypersoft. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what he does. Of course, it's a very different, well, not very different, but the potential to be a different strategy to ourselves. And now we skip on to lap 12, and we can see that Carlos Sainz is trying for a move on our teammate Daniel Ricciardo, who is yet to come into the pit lane. So not a great afternoon for Ricciardo, but he's putting up a valiant fight against Carlos Sainz, and it looks as if Sainz has got past there, and yes, indeed he has. So hopefully Ricciardo has done us a little bit of a favour there, because he has held up Sainz, and so long as our teammate lets us past before the start of lap 13, we should be able to go back in pursuit of the McLaren man. Of course, the Spaniard replacing Fernando Alonso this season and not doing a terrible job in that McLaren. He sits in P9 in the driver's standings, but it looks as if we can't quite get past Daniel Ricciardo there. Our teammate not making it easy for us, is he? Of course, he is on a different strategy, and he has every right to race us. But it looks as if we are going to be in a different race to him this afternoon. And we do go down the inside of him into Turn 1 and up into P10. So still behind Sainz. But I think we probably have closed the gap a little bit. We can see his like driver tag, which means that we're hovering around a second behind him. We may get DRS here on lap 13. Of course, we've got 3 DRS zones around this circuit, which is perfect for sort of closing up to cars up ahead. And indeed, we are in the DRS zone, and hopefully that can stay the case for the next few laps. Now, skipping 1 lap ahead on to lap 14, we are still just about within that DRS window, I believe, of Carlos Sainz. Or are we? No, I think we have actually dropped out of it, because we don't get DRS on, well, the most beneficial straight on this circuit on the run-up to the final chicane. And trying to use the higher ERS modes in this stage of the Grand Prix. You can see we're still on about 42% of the ERS deployment left. But we are using quite a bit in this stage of the race. And we have closed up to Sainz, so looking pretty good in that final sector of this circuit. It's really that middle sector that we're really losing the time to Carlos Sainz. But just 1 lap later, on lap 15, we are, well, we should be within DRS range. Yes, 6.5 tenths of a second we are now behind Carlos Sainz. And it is set up beautifully to at least try for a move on the Spaniard here. And getting towards the DRS zone now. And we're going to open the flap on this main straight, closing and closing further. We've got the overtake ERS mode. We go to the outside, and that is a pretty easy overtake as we brake at the 100-meter board, and beautiful into that final corner. As now we've got Roman Grosjean in the pit lane, which brings us up another position and should get us into P8 now. Is that? Yes, indeed it is P8. So we're not looking too bad at this stage of the race. Closing up to Kevin Magnussen as well, who just started to get a little bit away from us in the first stint of the race. So we're very much in with a shout of being the best of the rest this afternoon. But if we are to do that, we're going to have to sort of fend off Carlos Sainz from behind. Because, of course, he is on the Hypersoft tyres, which is theoretically the quicker compound. So we did really well to get ahead of him, to be fair. But he is still loitering behind as Pierre Gasly is in for his 2nd stop of the day. So that's surely him committing to a 3-stop strategy. And we're ahead of him on track, which means we have every right to battle him for position later on in the Grand Prix. So sat in P7 now, this is actually turning out a lot better than I thought. Of course, starting in P9, I thought, you know, maybe we can get P7, but P6 is very much a possibility in this Grand Prix as we run wide there at the start of Sector 2 there at the chicane, and we get a very poor exit on to the first of 3 DRS zones on this lap, and it looks as if Sainz is going to go down the inside of us here, and we are going to go side by side with the Spaniard as we just about fend him off. But as we go towards the hairpin now, he's surely going to be eyeing up another move on the main straight, and now he just sticks behind for the meantime. He'll very gladly take the DRS, as now we've got Pierre Gasly very much waiting in the wings for something to happen between the two of us. And Sainz now very much within firing range. Is he going to go for a move here on the main straight on the run up to the final chicane at the circuit? No, he isn't. He's just going to stick behind for the meantime. And as we skip 1 lap later on lap 18 of the Grand Prix, rather than attacking us, Sainz is very much in a defensive mood from Pierre Gasly, who is again on a set of the Hypersoft tyres. So his 3rd set of Hypersofts in this Grand Prix, which means that he literally has to come into the pit lane before the end of the Grand Prix. Although if he did do half a race distance on the Hypersoft tyres, then I would applaud him for that, because that would be quite a feat. But lap 18, so yeah, Gasly has got 1 more remaining pit stop in this Grand Prix. And we have 1 remaining pit stop in the Grand Prix, which means we are fighting Pierre Gasly for position at the moment. This is very much for track position. We have every right to fight for the Red Bull driver. So you can see there in the final chicane, we actually gained quite a bit on Gasly, and we didn't even cut the track, so I'm pretty proud of that one. But we're just 1 lap later in the Grand Prix, lap 19. This is surely going to be a good chance for Gasly to get ahead of us using the grip of those a lot newer Hypersoft tyres than our own Ultrasofts. And is Gasly going to try and go around the outside? He did try it, but he's stuck behind for the meantime, as it looks as if Kevin Magnussen up ahead of us is really starting to pull away. Yes, he's 3 seconds ahead. And while we're busy fighting Pierre Gasly, Magnussen's very much just doing his own race at the moment. It must be a pretty boring one. All I can say is I'm glad that I'm not Kevin Magnussen, because this would make for an incredibly boring video. So it's a good job that we are actually battling people here on lap 19 of the Grand Prix, as we do fend off Pierre Gasly at the end of that lap. But skipping just one lap forward, this is the favourite position to pick up, isn't it, at the start of Sector 2. Because once again, we've got Pierre Gasly going for a move in this DRS zone. This time he's got the inside line. Surely we're going to be helpless. And indeed we are. So Gasly gets up in to P7. And we have got to settle for P8. Although we have still got another two DRS zones on this lap to try and get ahead of Gasly. And surely we're going to have to use all of our ERS. And maybe even a little bit extra fuel. Yes, indeed. We do go up to Rich Mix and overtake ERS, just to try and get ahead of Gasly, because I think if we don't get back past him now, it's going to be very difficult to beat him in the rest of the Grand Prix. We just wait in the wings for the meantime, but Gasly gets a very poor exit off the final chicane, almost goes into the Wall of Champions, and we do get ahead of the Frenchman using the DRS to full effect as we break now into turn 1. Is Gasly going to go for a move? No, he isn't. We have the superior grip there, and that is brilliant racing between the two of us. And I don't know how long this is going to last, but I'll try and fight Gasly for as long as possible. So we're going to remain on board for the meantime. You can see just over 1/10 of a second between the two of us as we slide through that corner. Our tyres not in great condition. I believe lap 22 is our scheduled pit stop. So we've just got to sort of bear the tyres for a little bit longer. And Gasly goes back down the inside of us and up again into P7. So yeah, our tyres really didn't help with us there, and 1.3 seconds down compared to our previous lap time, or in fact our best lap time, just showing exactly how much we're struggling compared to the fresher hypersoft tyres of Pierre Gasly. But once again, we're going to go back up into overtake ERS mode and just try and get back past Gasly, because we do seem to have the pace in this Renault compared to the Honda-powered Red Bull in the final sector. Once again, on the DRS, on the overtake ERS mode, are we going to go for a move? Gasly almost going defensive there into turn 1. We're going to have to stick behind for the meantime, harvesting a bit of ERS through the first section of corners. But yeah, Gasly stays ahead of us for the meantime, and pretty much helpless to well, whatever he chooses to do. But we dive into the pit lane on lap 22. As I mentioned, a 13-lap stint on the ultra-soft tyres was the goal, and a 13-lap stint is exactly what we achieved. So we've got 13 laps left in this Grand Prix. Should be just another set of ultra-softs to go to the end of this Canadian Grand Prix. And this time a 2.9 second pit stop. So not the greatest, but still we'll take it. As you can see there, Carlos Sainz emerging in the first couple of corners. It looks as if the Spaniard has jumped us in the pit phase. Yes, indeed he has. So, well, he's done two stints on the Hypersofts, and he's fitted a set of Ultrasoft tyres before we have, and he's now ahead of us on the track, which is a bit of a bummer, but we've still got 13 laps to try and get ahead of him. 1.9 seconds ahead as well. So we were comfortably ahead of Sainz at one point. Not quite sure what's happened there. But now we're just going to take a look at what the running order is looking like on lap 24 of this Grand Prix. I believe everybody should have made their final stops of the afternoon. We've got Lewis Hamilton leading the way as he laps one of the Williams cars. Looking like a pretty good, solid drive from Hamilton at the moment, ahead of his title rival Sebastian Vettel in that Ferrari, with Valtteri Bottas, who's had a good afternoon, up from 6th to 3rd at the moment. So fair play to him. And then we've got Charles Leclerc sat in at P4, down one position from his starting grid position of P3. And then we have got Max Verstappen, who's on a different strategy to his teammate in P5. I'm not quite sure what Gasly's doing, to be honest. It's a bit of a weird strategy. And then in P6, Kevin Magnussen ahead of Romain Grosjean, who is currently fighting with Carlos Sainz. As we close up to them, this could do us a bit of good. Because, of course, Sainz got ahead of us in the pit phase, and he is now duelling with the Haas car of Romain Grosjean. And I'm not sure what sort of strategy he's on, because he started on the ultra-soft tyres, and he's now on a set of super softs. So Grosjean could be on the one-stopper, meaning he doesn't have to stop again this afternoon. And it looks as if him and Sainz are going at it, but we are closing at a rate of knots. And is it going to be a double overtake? Yes, it is. Up into P8 we go, and a beautiful double overtake on Grosjean and Sainz. Don't mind if I do. We must have closed a good 2 seconds on them on that lap. That was just a stonking lap. We're really in the zone at this stage of the Grand Prix. And then we've got Pierre Gasly emerging from the pit lane on lap 25. It's all going on with 10 laps to go in this Grand Prix. And the Frenchman Pierre Gasly just emerges ahead of us in P7. And well, we're going to have to really bump up the ERS and go on to maximum fuel usage if we want to overtake the Frenchman and finish ahead of him in this Grand Prix. So he's fitted a set of the ultra soft tyres, which means they shouldn't be in too dissimilar condition to our own come the end of the Grand Prix. Going very aggressive over that chicane there and on our run to the back end of the circuit on lap 25. We are 7.5 tenths behind Gasly, which means we are comfortably within DRS range. Now, looking at the fuel situation, we are minus, but we've really got to go for it at the moment. We'll take a hit later on in the race as long as we can get ahead of Gasly, because just look at our Renault engine. Those upgrades have worked an absolute treat this weekend, and especially compared to the Honda power unit in the back of the Red Bull, it is looking pretty juicy as we close up on Gasly. Can we get ahead of him into turn 1? We dive down the inside side by side. We push Gasly out wide, almost make contact with him and maybe even make a little bit of contact, but he's still ahead of us. Fair play to the Red Bull man. He is still in P7, and now we've got a safety car deployed in the middle of our battle. To be fair, for our fuel usage, it's probably come at a good time, to be honest. And Lewis Hamilton it is that's out of the Grand Prix. So let's take a look at what happened to him. And his engine has just gone up in flames. On lap 26 of the Grand Prix, he was in a commanding lead by a good few seconds, and it has literally gone up in smoke. His championship challenge is looking not great after that, and Sebastian Vettel has inherited the lead of the Grand Prix. He's looked second best to Hamilton all afternoon, and now all of a sudden he is sat in the lead of the Canadian Grand Prix, ahead of his teammate Charles Leclerc. So currently it's looking like a 1-2-4 Ferrari. Not quite sure what's happened to Bottas. He's actually behind Leclerc, so Leclerc must have made an overtake on Bottas. I wasn't too sure whether something had happened to the other Mercedes as well. Then we've got that man Max Verstappen sat in P4. Been a pretty quiet afternoon for him with Kevin Magnussen in P5. It's been a very quiet afternoon for him, but fair play to him. He's ahead of Pierre Gasly, who is surely going to be looking racy compared to that Haas car now. Maybe this is where Gasly's strategy really comes into it. Of course, he's got the fresh tyres on his car, and he's not actually too far behind his teammate, or he won't be once this safety car period comes to an end. So you've got to say, Sebastian Vettel looking very much favourite to take the win of this Grand Prix now. We have got 6 laps left in this Grand Prix, I believe, or we will do once we get racing again, and we are now ready to get green in this Grand Prix. And we are very late on the brakes there into the final chicane. That will very much compromise us as we lap Robert Kubica there in the Williams car to start lap 30, and we now have 6 laps left in this Canadian Grand Prix. Can we get ahead of Gasly? Can we get ahead of Magnussen? I think they're going to have to be our main goals, as Gasly was very much out of shape there through turn 2, but as we go out towards the first chicane, we settle into formation, and Pierre Gasly is still ahead of us at this stage. But we're just going to sit behind. DRS won't be active, I don't believe, until lap 32, so we're now skipping ahead 1 lap onto lap 31. So of course no DRS currently, but Gasly still looking racy to try and get ahead of Kevin Magnussen, who has put in a stellar performance this afternoon in the Haas car. But is it now going to be in jeopardy as they go side by side in at the end of sector 2? And it is Pierre Gasly who prevails and is up into, is that P5? I believe that is P5. But still, Kevin Magnussen not giving up. And now we're tagging on to the back of this battle. Yes, indeed, it is P5 for Gasly, P6 for Magnussen, and P7 for ourselves, ahead of Carlos Sainz. But is it going to be P7 for too long? Or are we going to get the run on Magnussen? We're just closing ever so slightly. We're going to go for an attacking move into this final chicane. Almost going side by side with Magnussen. We settle behind, and that's really compromised us, because now we are going to have Carlos Sainz trying to get back ahead of us here at the start of lap 32, but no, Sainz sits behind, and well, this is just an enthralling Grand Prix. We've got 4 laps left. Is it 4 laps? 32, 30, yes, 4 laps. Or by the time I've worked out how many laps it is, it's going to be 3.5, isn't it? Either way, we're behind Kevin Magnussen, and we now have DRS active. So I'm not sure whether he's going to get the DRS of Gasly, but regardless of whether we get DRS, we're not going to be challenging him, because that was a terrible exit off the start of the Sector 2 chicane. This is the second Sector 2 chicane. I don't really know the corner numbers around here, so I do apologise. But either way, I was right. We're not challenging Magnussen. But now we go to this hairpin at the back end of the circuit. And we're still within 1 second. So we should be able to have a go at Magnussen at the end of lap 32. But we're using this overtake ERS. We haven't got a lot of fuel to use. But even though we're using this, deploying as much ERS as we can, it just doesn't seem to be enough to get ahead of the Haasman. Although we get a brilliant exit off the final chicane, and we may be able to challenge Magnussen now in to turn 1. We're going to go around the outside, which should turn to the inside into turn 2, and we're now going to take that inside line. I'm going to be side by side with Magnussen into the rest of the circuit, and as we come to the first chicane, Magnussen's going to have the outside line, but we're going to just brake a little bit later, and there's a bit of contact there as Magnussen tries to hold it out, but we get up into P6, and what a battle that was between the two of us. Absolutely fantastic racing, and now we go to the front of the pack. With just 1 lap left in this Grand Prix, we have still got a battle for the lead of the race as Charles Leclerc is going to go down the inside of his teammate, and Vettel has locked up into turn 1 and has bottled the win of this race. Sebastian Vettel relinquishes the lead to his teammate, and that could prove costly in the title fight. It's just like 2011, Vettel has bottled the lead of the race to Charles Leclerc, and Leclerc comes through for what I believe is his first victory in this modded career mode. So well done to Charles Leclerc. He comes through for the 25 points ahead of his teammate, who will be bitterly disappointed with Valtteri Bottas taking the final podium position, Max Verstappen in P4. Gasly was just too far ahead of us. We couldn't challenge him as much as we tried. And as we come through the final chicane, I think we can be very happy with our afternoon's work. It's been a very exciting race for ourselves. And we come across the line not far behind Gasly for an impressive 8 points and P6 in at the Grand Prix. What a Canadian Grand Prix that was. Battles everywhere. It was a bit of a slow start, but that man made sure it was a good finale to the race. Charles Leclerc taking the victory, and well done to him and Ferrari, who take a 1-2. It was pretty much Lewis Hamilton's race, but of course he DNF'd, and it is Leclerc on top of the podium. So well done to Ferrari once again. As you can see, Leclerc will treasure that trophy, I am sure. And as we take a look at the race results, I've pretty much said what the top 6 is already. So Magnussen was behind us in P7. Really happy actually to get ahead of Magnussen, with Sainz in 8th. Our teammate Ricciardo, he made the 1-stop work, so fair play to him, in 9th, with Perez coming all the way through from 17th up to 10th. And as we look further down the order, it's a DNF for Hamilton, and Roman Grosjean, who was very much in the mix, finished in P17, so I think the safety car must have not helped him, because he was having a good race up until that safety car period. But yeah, absolutely gutting for Lewis Hamilton, I'm sure, who looked a dead cert for the race victory. And that means he slips behind his teammate in the driver's standings now, with Vettel taking a 22-point lead to the French Grand Prix after just 7 rounds in this championship. Leclerc moves up to P5. It's been a difficult start to the season for him, so good victory for him. And we move ahead of Carlos Sainz, a man we've been battling a lot this season, up to P9. In terms of Renault, unfortunately, we stay in P6, but if we can get a good few race results in the following few rounds, then we should be looking alright. It's Ferrari leading the way from Mercedes, but join me next time for the French Grand Prix to see what happens there. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this race. It was probably one of my favourite of the season, I keep saying it, but this career mode just seems to be producing some really good races. So leave a like if you've enjoyed it, and I'll catch you guys in the next video for the French Grand Prix. Do take care. Bye-bye.